Welcome to Lighten Up, a show about bringing more love, light, and joy into your life, and archived on the Lighten Up program page. Please join us in the chat room by clicking on the chat room icon located on the left-hand side of our menu bar. Now the host of Lighten Up, Isabel Merians.
Welcome to Lighten Up with Isabel, your good news show. I want a special welcome to our viewers here in America and those around the world. I recently met someone from Siberia when I was in Florida this winter who told me she had been watching the show for some time, so that made me very happy. And I'm very happy to have a special guest today, Charlotte Bennett Schoen, who is very well known for all of her good works. The good news today is that all New York buildings that are being built in the future are required to have a green roof.
Oh, fabulous.
Which is wonderful because these panels of small plants on the top of roofs can take in and cleanse more carbon dioxide from the air than trees can. So that was really a very good news thing to hear. And you're always happy to hear good news is happening. Now, the really good news is my guest today, and I feel very fortunate and very joyous to have Charlotte Bennett Schoen, who is a global activist and who has done so much wonderful work over a vast range of, what shall I say, of subjects.
Yes, but they all connect.
They all connect, absolutely. And she's basically a global activist who has worked for decades to change the global culture of violence. Welcome, Charlotte.
I thank you, Isabel.
And because her background was so extensive, I really had to choose very carefully those things which we're going to discuss today. And so there's several topics I want you to start by speaking about, if you would. First of all, I'd like you to start with your domestic violence advocacy.
It's a pleasure. Isabel knows that I often say the expression, why not? And some years ago, I started to work for a domestic violence agency, part of Bergen County, Alternatives to Domestic Violence. And I learned that there was this fabulous responsiveness. My job was to organize within the community a project where our neighbors, our friends, would go into court with people having domestic violence hearings, be an accompaniment for them. The program was called Court Accompaniment, and it meant the world of difference because you were alone or not alone. In these last 30 years, the world has changed a lot, and the courts have changed a lot. And this whole concept of domestic violence went from being perceived as a family matter, where the perpetrator would be walked around the block, to something illegal that I have been able to use with my international work to places where it was not yet illegal.
Right.
And I found a responsiveness within our community neighbors, our friends and neighbors.
That they were willing to go to court.
They literally staffed the program, which is going on to this day.
That's wonderful. And how long ago was that, Charlotte?
It started in 1992. The 90s was a watershed time. There was a particular murder of a teacher. Her name was Kathleen Quagliani, who was murdered in her house by her husband with her young son nearby.
Okay.
And the outrage of the communities and the organization of the communities that they then understood, and this happened all over New Jersey. This is when Shelter Our Sisters started, Alternatives to Domestic Violence started, the Women's Center in Englewood started.
So there was a rise in the consciousness, not only of the women who had been abused, because many of the people who had been abused were reluctant to come forward.
No, they were ashamed to.
The
religions told you not to do it. But best of all is our legislators, with a lot of personal courage, changed the law.
Right.
New Jersey was one of the first states that changed the domestic violence law. But that gave me the understanding that everything was possible.
Right.
To change the cultural violence, to change the organization of who responded. And to this day, that experience has helped shape and frame what I do.
Much of your work. Well, I knew that. I knew that.
Yeah.
And this was done in the town of Englewood?
I worked for the county, so this
Bergen
affected
County.
Bergen County.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that if you had a master's degree in the county, your title was a program development specialist.
Oh, my.
I'm a program development specialist.
Congratulations.
Well, yeah, thank you. And it does describe, because you can develop, yay for the teachers,
Yeah.
you can put together any kind of program.
Well, that must have been a very powerful thing also with this Me Too movement, which has caught on so brilliantly.
A sea change of change.
A huge change in the number of young women who run for Congress and are taking very, very powerful
Our
stances.
own beloved Loretta Weinberg, at the age of 83, posted on Facebook the traumatic abuse she had faced as a kid that she never had spoken about before.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know. I spoke to a friend, who told me about her abuse, and she told me that she had told her parents about it, and her parents did nothing because in their religious community, that sort of thing was not addressed, and the perpetrator was free to continue
Right.
his behavior.
And she had
Which
to
is
deal with
shocking.
shame on top of the abuse.
Exactly. So I think, as they say, we've come a long way, baby. Well, thank you for sharing that. And would you explain a little bit about how your experience with advocacy there brought you to your next assignment, which was overseas?
I'd be delighted to. I had said at the beginning that all the things fit together. I served on the Englewood City Council for 6 years. I was council president. I have a well-substantiated feeling that when women are in office, it changes the conversation.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I advocate no matter where I am in the world. Sadly, women are often wait to be asked to run, where men are, take me.
I'm here.
I'm here.
Right.
Might not even be good, but I'm here. So 6 years in city council, did my thing, confronted corruption. I know that corruption and violence go together. That's been studied under peace-building things. And after 6 years, actually, I have a friend here in Nyack who was my mentor, who went under the umbrella of domestic violence, of global justice, and had worked overseas. And I was like, I want to be Marcia. And I did. I announced at a council meeting, 2 terms, council president, had done my thing, and that I was going to go, and my first assignment was literally to Lucknow, India. I'd been to India 4 times previously, had never been to Lucknow. I'm ashamed to tell you I didn't even know Lucknow. It's the capital of the largest state of India, which if you disconnected that state, it would be the 5th largest country in the world.
Well, wait now. You said you were assigned. How do you mean assigned?
In New York City, there's an agency, American Jewish World Service. They don't do it now, but for 25 years they did it, where they literally, based on your skill sets, assigned you an NGO to go look at. That's what Marcia had done. And it didn't take a lot of courage that you had an assignment, you had an agency, they bought your ticket at the time, which was a couple $1,000s, and somebody had your back. So I left the council meeting, and it got everybody's attention. You're like, what? You're really doing that? And it was a positive, wonderful experience in Lucknow, which is a beautiful historic city.
So there was someone in Lucknow who was to greet you and to see that you were taken care
Who
of.
wanted me to come to their NGO, which was called Sabagi Shikson Kendra.
In case people don't know what an NGO is, would you explain?
It's a non-governmental organization, which means it's not government-sponsored. It's funded through its own resources. This was an agency, yay to the teachers again. 30 years earlier, a teacher had started it.
Okay.
And they were advocates for families, for education, for literacy, for health, for clean water.
Mm-hmm.
And that person was in touch with AJWS, American Jewish World Service. And when they saw my resume, which you rewrite as skill sets,
Mm-hmm.
and that's very freeing. It's like not who you are,
But what you can do and what you can offer, absolutely.
And they welcomed me. They met me at the airport. Marcia had advised me, don't get an apartment. Stay at a place where there's people coming and going, that you're not lonely after work or on the weekends. And it was the best advice I got.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
So where did you end up staying?
They found me a guest house, which turned into a funny story. The first 4 days, they picked me up. They took me to work. They took me home. They picked me up. And on the 5th day, this lovely man said to me, okay, we're going to show you how to do it on public transportation. And they had a meeting, a big conference. It was a beautiful NGO on its own campus. It had housing for agencies. It had
So
food.
they were very well equipped, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they told me how I would come and go, and they gave me 2 staff members who trained me to go home. But the transportation involved a bigger bus, a smaller bus, and a rickshaw. And it took 1 hour and 15 minutes
Wow.
each day, each way.
Wow.
And I felt so bad because they took me home, and then they had to go by themselves. And they came back the next morning. And by the end of the 2nd day, I was like, you can't do this. I mean, I'm worrying too much about you. I said, I can do it. I can do it. So I did. And the first day, you find a bicycle rickshaw. And the first day that he crosses this 8 lanes of traffic, your heart is going like this.
Sure.
And I'm like, I can't be that. And by the 2nd day, I was an old hand. He showed me where I would wait for the second little bus, and I had the right amount of rupees in my hand. So it was 15 rupees, 30 rupees, 45 rupees.
Working up to the big bus.
And I met the most wonderful people on the transportation.
So tell me specifically in terms of being there on a day-to-day basis, in
pleasure.
addition to getting there, after you
Right.
got there and
Well,
got back.
yeah.
What were your specific?
I have a
Yes,
master's degree in education.
Right.
This made me this program development specialist. I joined their team that had a grant funded actually by Norway.
Oh, really?
And in that grant, I was part of a team that worked with village women from specific villages near Benares, used to be called Varanasi, called Benares now, right on the banks of the Ganges River. And these 30 women would come and spend the week with us in
Wow.
Lucknow. If you had a baby little, you brought the baby with you. They would stay in the dorms, eat the food. And I was part of the team that taught, that did projects. As a native speaker, I could help with the English speaking in terms of democracy and
Wait,
what
you spoke Hindi?
Oh, I learned 8 words.
Oh, okay.
Mainly,
Hello, welcome.
hello, welcome, and they were dressed beautifully. This is what I might wear to work,
Nice. You fit
which
right
I think
in.
is nice.
It's nice.
And I would go with them to Benares. So whatever the agency asked me to do, I did.
Mm-hmm.
I felt very lucky to be there. All people do is say thank you when you undertake.
They're grateful, I'm sure.
Grateful and appreciative and hospitable.
Mm-hmm.
So the work week is 6 days a week, and weekend is Sunday. I did the commute every day, which was fascinating in itself. And then for a week at a time, several times, I went and I stayed in Benares. I got to go to people's homes. The hospitality was thrilling. The Indian food is the best.
Really? Wow.
Nothing better than eating Indian food 3 times a week. And I want to tell you one story. One day we were coming home from work, which involved going to this village. And again, I'm teaching English, I'm teaching democracy, I'm doing songs. And one of the ways to speak English, I thought, we shall overcome, is a good thing to teach.
Mm.
And as I'm teaching this song, Ruby, whose English was fabulous, bilingual, taps me on the arm and she goes, no. And they do it different. We go into an organization and we sing it like this. She takes my hand and we start to circle and they sing it for me in Hindi.
Really?
Because democracy, India is an old democracy. They have their own story. But they already knew it in Hindi.
Wow.
And I remember blogging about that because
That's so interesting.
that was like a who knew.
Yeah, who would have
who knew?
imagined? Who would have imagined? Well, now, was the caste system very evident when you were there?
It is illegal.
I know that.
What was there that was shocking to me, which is something that we as Americans know about, you and I are privileged white Americans, the caste system as you learn it is very racist.
Yes.
And the darker you are, the worse jobs you get, and the worse it's perpetrated. And this area in Lucknow has the Dalit people. So the goal of the project was to keep the adolescent girls in school. So these beautiful Dalit girls, beautiful, coming over to the program, faced the risk of rape and attack. And the program got them vans to bring them for academic education, computer education, vocational education, depending on their wants. And one day, we were coming back in Benares, which is profound because it's a holy city, one of the 2 oldest cities on the planet Earth. And it was Ruby, Reshma, and me. So I am Jewish, Ruby is Christian, Reshma is Muslim, and Ruby, the Christian, is taking us to see the Hindu ceremony on the banks of the Ganges River. And it got chilly at night. And there's a vibrant street life, and they sell the most beautiful shawls. And we are trained to know that when you go to these projects where you are assigned, only do things that are sustainable. Don't leave a laptop. Don't give out money. Because you leave, the next person's not necessarily going to do it. But it's cold, and we're wearing cotton, and it's nice. And I say, can you please let me, I want a shawl, and I would be honored and happy if you let us each get a shawl. And if you've been to India, everything is gorgeous and everything is affordable. And we each got a shawl, which I treasure. And then we went to the banks of the Ganges, where we watched this Hindu ceremony, which is life-altering because it's dramatic and profound.
Was it a funeral?
Nope, it's every day on the sundown on the banks of the Ganges. There are prayers to the Mother Ganges. It's a holy river.
Yes.
But it's done in Hindi.
Sure.
And the priests are wearing white robes, and they're blowing conch shells, and there's bells, and you're welcomed. And it struck me, here's what I believe in, interfaith is peace building. And I was on the banks of the Ganges for a Hindu ceremony with a Catholic and Christian Catholic and Muslim friend watching it. It was one of those life-altering, and I knew I was in the right place doing the right thing with my time.
That's a wonderful, wonderful way of viewing it.
And helping the adolescent girls at the same time.
Of course, of course. Well, you've done so much advocacy and wonderful things. And then I know that your next assignment was in Thailand.
It was indeed.
Now, let me ask this. When you came back, from India, do you make a report to the agency that had sent you, and how does that work?
They did. They asked you to keep a blog, which I keep to this day. It's Assignment Charlotte. And I found I loved writing on the blog, and everything is visual, so I posted a lot of photos on the blog. And I draw since I'm a child, so I have these blank books that by the time I come home.
You had journals.
And sometimes they're thoughts, they're program development. Sometimes I meet a lot of people that way. The drawings are funny because it's only in ink. So sometimes they're spot on and sometimes they're demented. And I made friends.
Sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm.
So then the next assignment was Thailand. And what was that specific assignment about?
It was an education for me because I got a phone call from AJWS. I said I'd be happy to go back. It had just been so positive. And somebody called me and said, would I go to an agency that helped sex workers? And I remembered saying to the person, human rights are human rights, of course I would. Mm-hmm. Sex workers at the time wasn't part of my vocabulary. And I went to a, again, 30-year-old agency called Empower. I don't know if you've been to Thailand.
No, I haven't.
They sent me to Chiang Mai, which is a very touristy town within the Golden Triangle, big fancy hotels, tourist medicine, a night market that is spectacular.
I'm sure.
And a lot of expats which come and live there because your money is worth so much.
So much more, surely.
Yeah. And the sex workers were the sweetest, nicest people. Again, they didn't have guest houses because it wasn't the custom there. And I had my own place close to go to work because while I took the educational opportunity to learn what I learned, but commuting 2.5 hours a day is not a way
fun,
to live your
no.
life. Well, it was fun, but it was no way to live your life. So I lived close by in a lovely place where I could just walk to work. And I met the nicest people who could be sitting here with us. They didn't necessarily speak English.
Well, how did you communicate?
When the director was there, it was easy. When the director left to go back to Australia, it was difficult. But again, it's an opportunity. One person had great English, Molly, and we got along fine. One, she asked me to email her, and I think she was using Google Translate or something to then email me back. But the opportunities were amazing.
Well, let me ask this. When you say sex workers, there was a film made about sex workers in India. And, you know, it really showed their lives and what they were like. It was really quite fascinating. This was a couple of years back. And they showed the daughter of one of the sex workers who had the option of being gotten out, but she wanted to stay with her mother. So, you know, that becomes problematic. And also, what happens to the children of some of these sex workers when they're first born? Aren't some of them taken away?
Well, here's where the agency, I was actually asked to make a textbook for sex workers.
A textbook for
A
sex?
textbook. Well, you say that you'll do what they need. This is what
You
they
do.
needed. I'm a program development specialist. I'm a teacher. And they gave me a mishmash of 100 pages to put together. And every day I had a computer. Some of the things were, you could put a
Practical?
thumb drive. Language. Sex workers came for a revenue stream. And I'm telling you, they were you, they were me, they were these nice people that were trying to make money for their family. The government gives you condoms to stay safe. They give you health checkups on a regular basis.
And this is in Thailand.
This is in Thailand. It was
Right.
very different than my experience growing up in America, and it was different than my experience in India. The first project I was involved in, they had agencies from all over Thailand. They made a film about human rights for sex workers,
Oh, really?
starring the sex workers. And it was in a big hotel in Bangkok, attended by many people in a big hotel. So it was a
So-
very positive experience.
It sounds it. Now, are these sex workers, are they unionized? Do they have certain rights? Do they have voting rights? Do they have...
They came from different countries. So many people came from Burma, which had just emerged from this military dictatorship.
Right.
But many people came from Burma and with the need to learn Thai and time to learn English, because who's supporting sex workers? Men from many different countries. The sex workers had to pay rent, had to feed their
course.
children, wanted their children to go to school, and it
Were the
became
sex workers all female or not?
all the people I worked with were
Were
female.
female.
But I know from being in Thailand there were some
Male.
men, young men. It's the capital of the sex change industry. A personal story. I said, you do whatever you do to help, and I'm there and I'm making this textbook. I'm teaching occasional English classes because the agency offered Thai classes and English classes, and we all had lunch together. These agencies provide lunch for you, and you sit together, and again, the food's good. Southeast Asian food is good. We went together, and I didn't really understand till I got there. We went to borrow frames, mounted frames, because we were participating in an advocacy outdoor exhibit. And when I get there, I realize it's an agency that's helping young people who are having sex change surgery, which is big surgery.
Of course it is.
And in the agency, there's people at different stages of the change. And we're in a van, and I pick up a big armful of these frames that we're borrowing. And inwardly, I'm like, wow, boy, have I come someplace different in my life. But you do what you have to do. You're a grown-up, and everybody's nice to me, and I'm the same. I'm just from this agency in Power. And we borrowed maybe 50 frames. which we then go to this outdoor exhibit, and we put up
the pictures.
posters about Empower, how we can help. Every day is interesting. That was one of the more interestings.
Yeah.
The only thing I knew about sex change, my son-in-law had given me a mystery book, and that's the context, and it was this memorable mystery book, which I'll lend you one day if you like. So Thailand was interesting, and the food was great, and the fancy hotels were great.
Well, did you have a good feeling that the program was really accomplishing its mission?
It was in its 30th year, so I knew that it was. For myself to do things, you know that I'm a Rotary member. I went to Rotary every week there. Found one that had bilingual,
Which was helpful.
Thai and expats. It was essential. The tones that are in Thai and Burmese are difficult for all of us, and I found a real stumbling block for me because I thought I was good in languages. And the Thai Rotary did spectacular rural projects with people who were saving the elephants there and building rural schools and bringing in clean water. So it was wonderful for me to be part of.
It sounds like that the Thai government was very advanced,
I think so.
you know, in their thinking and their liberalism and
Right,
you know.
and the AJWS knew that. And again, AJWS had my back, both in India and Thailand. You had a phone number, they came and visited you while you were there. But that leads us to Burma.
Yes, and that was your main happy.
Yeah, I am political. You know that I've run for office. I encourage women to run for office. I do see a connection between women at the table not being part of the corruption temptation, which I know leads to violence. So I had seen a film while I was in Thailand called The Lady. Beloved Aung San Suu Kyi was held in the highest esteem now. She is a woman of controversy now because of the murders of the Rohingya and the incarceration of journalists.
Well,
but
it's
I had
very
seen a
sad,
film about
yeah,
her.
But that's
And the film was called The Lady, and it touched me profoundly because of the politics. And I said to HOWS, I'd be happy to come back with you, but they did not send people to Burma.
really.
No.
Was there a reason?
I think it's because the junta had stayed so many years, and there were so many dangers
probably.
associated with it. And I'm so motivated, really, because this film and a Burmese friend who was part of it. And I said, well, I want to go to Burma, and I've done this twice, so I can take myself.
So you went without the backing of an agency.
Absolutely.
Wow, that takes a lot of courage. You're a woman warrior, my dear.
Oh, thank you, thank you. But all I'm telling you is that all I heard for 2 years was thank you, thank you.
But still,
Hugs and kisses.
But still, I know that you had a special affinity for Burma.
I did because this nascent democracy touched my heart. I loved living in Southeast Asia. If you need a visa run, look where you can go. You can go to Cambodia, you can go to Laos, you can go to Vietnam. Had I gone back right now, I would have gone over to Vietnam. It's like we go from New York
To Connecticut.
To Connecticut or
Absolutely.
Maryland.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, what were you specifically involved in Burma? Because I know you went to Burma twice.
I did. I went to a small agency called Smile, which I found through a Rotary friend. She's Burmese born, which we wouldn't know because her last name was Stone here. And at the time I was doing peace projects for Rotary, and she was amazed, like, where did you come from when I said I'm going to Burma? So she and I sat at a computer. We found that there's 100 NGOs in Burma. Not 100, maybe 900.
Wow.
And I'm a teacher. I'm a program development specialist. I also speak French, but that hasn't been useful. And she finds online a small agency started by teachers based on education, empowerment of families, education. I send them my skill set thing, and they're like, please come do peace building here.
Wonderful.
And you can't just get a visa for Burma. They have to send you some kind of documentation, which didn't say I was doing peace building. It said I would be doing capacity building for some kind of company. And they
Did they have to associate it with some business thing?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes, and they send me, and I go to New York and I get a visa and I show these business things. That way they give me a 3-month visa. Mm-hmm. All of these assignments have been 3 months before, which was required. Mm-hmm. The only difference going to Burma is AJWS didn't pay my airfare.
Right, you had to do that yourself.
Happy to do it.
Well, you're fortunate that you could. Sure.
Right. It's way less money living a modest life in India and Thailand than it is trying to do it in America.
I'm sure.
So off I went to Burma.
Wow.
And they met me at the airport. A lovely young man met me named Bilal, who's part of my life to this day.
Wow. That's impressive. And now what was your focus once you got to Burma?
He, meaning Mio Win, who was a person of great personal courage, in his 30s had started with some other teachers this NGO called Smile Education Foundation, wanted me to do week-long peace-building workshops in Burma. I would design them, he would get the people, and then we would take these workshops in the road. The office was in Yangon, previously called Rangoon, and he also had an office in Bago, which was only an hour and a half away, and an office in the famed Mandalay. Mm-hmm. And I admired him enormously. I learned from him 5 years ago about the murders of the Rohingya peoples.
Before the newspapers had it, probably.
It's a household word now.
Of course.
And the government at the time was saying, oh, it's just neighbors fighting with neighbors, Buddhist and Muslim fighting. And my being a native speaker was of a great advantage because things that were written, if English is your second language, I could then edit into English as your first language. When reports started to come in, and these first horrendous murders were in a town called Mitala, and Mio Win, who was in his 30s, had fact-finding meetings in his office. Wow. Which was my office 6 days a week, where people would come from all over Burma, where expats would send in reports and would say, that government's lying. Mm. This is not neighbor by neighbor.
So essentially you had the facts before they were really out there.
And Mio Win would put them into one document with his name on it and send them to every media source he could.
Well, he was very courageous, I tell you that.
And my peace-building workshops were based on documentation of people of personal courage. And I intentionally tried to show diversity in it. So I had Martin Luther King from America, Nelson Mandela.
From Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Aung San Suu Kyi, and of course Gandhi.
Yes. Well, that is fascinating. You know, I just want us to have time for what you're doing now.
I love it.
I know you're working with an organization called First Friends, and I think what you're doing now here in America again, we're so fortunate that you're back. So
I thank you for it. First Friends is an agency whose official name is First Friends of New York and New Jersey. And I knew about it years before I began to give it my time. But for me, the election in America of 2016 was a sea change.
It was a major sea change for the whole nation, believe me.
And I knew that I wasn't at risk. And I knew you weren't at risk, but I knew who was going to be at risk. Partly because of my experiences and partly because of my being political. So I called up First Friends and I said they have a unique program where people go into jails and detention centers and visit with what we call detainees, but they're treated like criminals. And they come here for a political asylum, which is their legal right to do. It's their legal right to cross the border anywhere and ask for political asylum. And we put them in jail. But I have to tell you, the one man I will visit this Thursday in 3 days is in the Hudson County Jail, which is the third of 3 jails, and he's been incarcerated for 2 years, 8 months now.
Oh, my God.
He has not been
how
outside.
how do they justify this? I mean, the man's committed no crime. He's done
Correct.
nothing illegal.
Correct.
How do the authorities then
They
feel?
say it's pending, that the judges are so busy, the whatever is pending. Under the government now, there's vacancies in judges. He comes through in New York. Even though he crossed the border in California, he was sent California, Arizona, Orange, New York, and now Bergen County, and then Hudson. It's his fifth jail. And they say it's pending. He has a lawyer through legal aid. He's trying to get bonded that he can get out. First friends could help him get out. He has no family here. He is so smart. I got assigned to him because I speak French. He's Côte d'Ivoire,
Which is
Ivory Coast, which
Ivory
is
Coast,
French
right.
colonialism,
Right,
French
right.
speaking. He's so smart. His English is great, and he wanted to speak English. He's so smart that in these 2 years, 8 months, he's fluent in Spanish.
Wow, he's taught himself.
He's taught himself. He speaks Spanish. In Bergen, he wasn't allowed to study for a GED, only if you're in for a crime.
How crazy is that?
How
Oh,
crazy
my
is that?
God.
Now he's been sent to Hudson jail. He's allowed to study for a GED.
So now, how often do you see this man?
I see him every week. They ask you at First Friends, will you go twice a month? But once you go, you say to yourself, self,
It's not
do I
enough.
not have, it's not America, but do I not have 30 minutes a week? Now, I don't go, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a social worker, I'm not even a program development specialist. You hang out.
Mhm.
You chat. I chat about his family. I chat about my family.
And he loves it because you're a friend. You're his first
You're
friend.
his first friend.
Now, you had told me once about a young man you had worked with named George. Whatever happened with George?
I saw George the other day.
Oh, did you?
I did. George is a previously detained.
Person. I remember.
He came from Uganda with a visa. And he crossed the border. He presented his visa and was put in jail for 7 months. It took 7 months to get out. And he's very articulate. And he tells the story of when he was incarcerated at the border in California, presenting himself to
The
whoever you're
authorities.
supposed to.
Right.
He was shackled, hand and feet and waist,
Oh, my God.
and marched across the room. He said the humiliation.
That's terrible.
You're this person of dignity. So he's a very eloquent speaker. And he and I have multiple times gone to different organizations to speak at First Friends.
That's a wonderful, wonderful
It
thing
is.
to do.
It is.
And has he gotten a job? Has he?
First Friends helped him get a job,
Wonderful.
got him a place to live. When I saw him recently, I had a friend who was redoing things in the house, and she had a lot of comforters and pillows. And I texted him and I said, could you use anything like this? And it was like, oh, that would be great. I was trying to save money for it, and could my roommate have one? So I stuffed up the Mini Cooper. George is 6'4". When we go together, I stuff him into the Mini Cooper. You never know what you might be able to do to be of a little bit of help.
Right, of course. That's lovely. Now, how long have you worked with First Friends?
Since the election, I am on the board of directors now. As a board of director member, I was part of the interviewing group. We have our first executive director. We have added a part-time assistant to the person who takes care of the people in detention.
It sounds like an absolutely wonderful organization, and I think it's important that more people know about it.
It is. It's celebrating its 20th anniversary next year. Last week we had an annual dinner that was attended by 250 people. There's 200 people who go into the jails and visit. There's 150 who are pen pals. It's been church supported for a long time, very generously. And I'm on a mission right now to get an organized support within the Jewish community. Have given names of people of Muslim faith to be on the board. This is everybody's issue.
Of course, absolutely.
And when you go to
Absolutely.
the jail and you visit, you don't know who you're going to get. Is it a man? Is it a woman?
Mhm.
Is it somebody Hindu? Is it somebody Christian? Is it somebody Muslim?
Well, let me ask this. Now, are you assigned to specific jails that you go to? I mean, they wouldn't give you a jail too far away, right?
You're assigned both a specific jail and a specific person. It only works when somebody in detention calls First Friends and asks for someone to come.
But how would they know?
There's posters inside the jail.
Oh.
For 20 years, First Friend has built a strong relationship with the detention centers, with the different sheriff's office. So in our area, there are 3 jails that get money from ICE to house detainees, and one is private. It's run by Core Civic. I have strong feelings that they could be out while they're waiting to hear from it.
Of course.
They are not criminals.
They're not criminals, of course.
Although our government is saying they're criminals. Even our jail officials are saying they're criminals, but that is not true.
No, of course they're not. They're just detained.
There's another thing that's not true I wanted to say to you. This is a revenue stream that our counties are making for our county governments. In Bergen County, that I know best, 4 years ago, their ICE contract, they got $4 million.
Would you explain to our viewers what ICE is?
ICE is the immigration, I'm going blank, ICE. It's our government agency that picks up people and puts them into detention. I'm going blank on the C. What is the C?
Committee?
Nope.
Nope. Sorry.
Nope. Customs.
Customs.
Immigration Customs Enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
And they have a big budget, and they pay the jails $110 a night to keep people in detention. But here's my one shocking thing of this interview.
They make
4
money.
years ago, Bergen County had a contract for $4 million. And now the contract is for $17 million.
It's insane.
It's insane, and it's hard
It's
for our
corrupting.
county.
And it's very corrupt.
Listen, I love the people who are on the freeholders. These are friends of mine. But they have to look at the morals of this, that they're keeping people in detention to
the
keep
benefit,
the money
coming.
we're taxpayers, we pay high taxes, but somebody's got to address this issue.
It's very
It is a
important.
moral, ethical issue.
I
We
agree.
talked about an ethics panel coming up.
Yes.
This is an ethical issue.
It's absolutely an ethical issue that should be resolved. Well, Charlotte, you have been a wonderful guest.
It's a pleasure.
It's been fun having you, and I thank you so much. I'm sure our viewers have gotten quite an earful and an eyeful as well.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you again to all my viewers who've been so wonderfully faithful. And thank you, and please join us for the next Lighten Up with Isabel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Isabel.
It's been a lot of fun. Have a toast.
Good. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Until next time, remember to live a more joyous life. Lighten up.